There's power in taking a photograph. There's power in being an artist.
It's the Phoenix Film Revival Podcast.
All right, so we have with us Bill Manning. Is that correct?
Yep.
Cool. I've been following Bill for a while on Instagram. He's got a lot of cool things going on. And today we're going to chat with him and see what that's all about. Thank you, Bill, for hopping on and chatting with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited to be here. It's very different being on the other end of the table, being the interviewee rather than doing the interviewing. So really excited to be on the show.
Thank you. Definitely. So tell me a little bit about yourself. I've noticed you're doing, you have a couple things going on, but I know you through Instagram as Atlanta Film Co.
Yep.
Is that correct? So what do you got going on there?
Yeah. I'll kind of give the genesis story as far as what led up to Atlanta Film Co. Way back a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Basically I was, just a photographer in the Atlanta area and started off in digital and then, discovered this amazing world of film photography. And, we had pretty much just one lab, one traditional wet lab at the time in Atlanta. And so I got a roll of film from them from this camera that a family friend had passed away and left me. And, and so I went to them, bought a roll and, shot it. I didn't even know how to meter and all that stuff. Cause I just was like, I'll just put it through my digital camera and whatever the exposure is for that. Then I'll, tinker on my little Yashica 635 and match the settings and it should come out right. And so brought it back to Dunwoody Photo and they processed it. A few days later came back and I saw these amazing slides. And from that point on, I was just like absolutely hooked. I was like, I have to know everything about this, And so from that point on, I just pretty much started loitering at Dunwoody Photo and just hanging out, talking to them, trying to understand things and, understand concepts of how to expose on film and everything along those lines. And so ended up developing this great friendship with Michael and Christina. And then ultimately, at the time, Stephen Wallace was helping out. And one night I was just kind of like, hey, I hang out here a lot and we talk a lot about all this stuff. I was like, why don't we go grab dinner? And I got this idea about us doing a podcast. Let's go talk about that. And so we went and our dinner ended up being like 3.5 hours long. And we left that going, yeah, we could totally do a podcast. Cause we're just, this dinner alone was 3 hours long. So that's when the podcast, we didn't know what we were doing going into that. The first 10 episodes were just absolutely terrible. The audio was just hot garbage, and,
Oh yeah.
The really cool thing out of it though, is that my wanting to learn, constantly improve. And, we've had people like, oh, you got an interesting format and everything along those lines. But it sounds like hot garbage. So I'm like, okay, rather than me shutting off, how do I improve? I'm asking questions. How do I make this? So my very early on with wanting to engage with the community to make a better product has been kind of like one of my big cornerstones. Right. So, that's where, and we just kept growing. And so locally we have KEH camera. And then we just started, we invited them onto the show. We knew some people from, friends that work there and everything. And so they came on the show and then, by episode 2 or 3, they're like, oh, we know, Bellamy Hunt, Japan Camera Hunter. You want to interview him? Or like, sure. And I'll admit my ignorance. I'm like, cool. Yeah, I'm happy to interview him. And then by the end of it, I was like, oh my God, this is the Japan camera hunter. Like I was just like,
Wow.
I felt so stupid. And then by the end of it, it was like the next episode we had interviewed Cinestill Film. So I was just like, I was interviewing these people before, like these titans that I didn't even like, didn't click as far as like how huge they were, right? So like,
Yeah.
and then within a couple of years, we were in Rochester interviewing Kodak, so some of the, and toured the facility and everything. So it was,
Awesome.
an amazing experience. So, but in all of that growth, we started seeing some difficulties. The pandemic really kind of threw a wrench into, film production and all that stuff. And so one of the things that we noticed at Dunwoody Photo was, just getting a hold of color film had been, incredibly difficult. There were times,
Yep.
where, we were, I don't want to say we were out of the pandemic, but like we definitely, like things are starting to slowly get back to normal and everything. And the film just was not, hitting inventory. And so things were getting kind of like dicey as far as like, hey, numbers are starting to slip on C41 processing and everything. We got to figure out a way to keep film flowing in. And so, so that's when, we started looking at, well, what can we do with the vision film and, can we, do that? And so we had reached out to Kodak Film Lab Atlanta, which is a ECN2 lab that does with motion picture film. They do, music videos, features. They even work with NASA. NASA still shoots on film, which is really cool.
Wow. That's
And
cool.
yeah, it's very fat. Like they did a whole big piece on Artemis, which is amazing. Like I just the story that Kodak Film Lab Atlanta has to tell with that one is just fascinating. Just Kodak is still a part of major moments in human history. Let's just kind of put it that way. But anyway, so we reached out to him and I said, hey, like, are you guys interested in this? Like, what if we cut down our own, rolls of 35 millimeter into our own 36 exposure and then we send it to you guys in batches and, get it processed. And they were open to it, which was fascinating because a lot of other places, like not to mention names, but there are other places, other labs that do features and stuff like that do ECN2 processing, and they're just like, nah, we're not in the business to doing stills, which I understand and I respect. So ECN2 for the longest time has always been this kind of closed door, only reserved for motion picture, right? And so when we presented this opportunity with Kodak Film Lab Atlanta, we went into this with the intention of, we're just going to kind of stock this at Dunwoody Photo and, and then we can keep processing going and scanning and all that stuff. And it just started growing and growing and growing. And then next thing we know, within a month, we've already started building out a website to offer this service, beyond, the Atlanta area. And then, so that's kind of how, Atlanta Film Co. was always just kind of like this idea that Michael and Christina had, coming out of this pandemic. And then when I came on board, I was like, hey, this is so cool that we're doing this for Atlanta, but what if we were to, incorporate with the website and everything? And then we went for it, and then it's just kind of like blown up from that point. So the cool part is that while we are cutting down and spooling down motion picture films, and I'll be perfectly honest and clear, we're rebadging film. People, it's kind of interesting, and I understand people, kind of scoff at private labeling and, it's not a new film, right? And I get it. I understand and I respect that. But I think from our perspective of coming out of this was that we wanted to keep it at a price point that is, that makes sense for this industry. And so, so currently right now our pricing is, for all of our color negative and our black and white, it's $9.99 a roll. And, people, I think that's a fair number, and it's grown, and people are buying from us, and they come back and they do EC2 processing through the Atlanta Film Co. website, where we've set up this way where you can buy processing or prepay it with the film that you purchase. So you can buy it without the processing, or you can add on to it a la carte. When you shoot it and you're done, you can ship it to us. And then we put it in queue with Kodak Film Lab Atlanta, and we take it to them. They just process it for us, and then we take it back, and then we scan it, and then deliver the negatives back to the customer. And so we just use that service, and so we kind of just built around this really cool product at the end of the day, and yeah, it works. And so now I'm excited to see that other labs are open to taking on EC2 processing from various other companies now that are providing an EC2 process that can be done on like Jobos and stuff like that make it a lot more accessible. So we're starting to see a lot more of that growth, and I think a lot of labs are now kind of starting to see that. And very early on, that was kind of like the biggest challenge for Atlanta Film Co. was like, EC2 processing is not accessible. This isn't a viable solution, right? And so that's been kind of like my challenge to kind of say, well, if it's not a viable solution, then what else are you going to process? If you're going to have shortages on films and there's everything along those lines, then you have to figure out a way to adapt, or your business is going to suffer as a result of it. And so I think a lot of smaller labs are seeing that opportunity to be able to add in that kind of processing to their lineup. And so we're starting to see more and more sales kind of uptick from that, and so bulk loading has never been a new thing. People have been doing it for the longest time, right? For decades, for as long as 35 has been out. And so it's kind of an exciting time that bulk loaders can monetize off this, right? They're making money off of film rather than losing money shooting film and everything along those lines. So like it's a really cool realization that hey, I can buy a whole bunch of film and I can spool it up, and I can enjoy the film that I shoot and sell it to some friends for at a decent price, and that pays for the film that I'm shooting with, right? So it works, and so it's been a very exciting 7-8 months that we've been doing this. I mean, we haven't been formally a company for a year, and I mean we're just growing so quickly. We're just trying to keep up with the pace.
That's good to hear. We definitely need it. It definitely is a challenge to get a hold of color film. And I mean, that's been the ongoing joke that we have here in Phoenix. A buddy of mine, he sent me a picture of 3 rolls of film sitting on the shelf at a Walgreens, and it's like $30-$40 for 3 rolls of not Portra. And but that's what's available. That's what you can get on the shelf. I usually order my stuff through either Freestyle or through B&H, just for the sake of price and convenience. But it's really important to have this accessible so we can continue doing it. Otherwise, the interest starts to drop off, and it's not so much. It's got to be available for people to want to continue shooting. And black and white is definitely different than shooting color. I've had a little bit of experience with bulk loading. We recently had a school donate 48 rolls of black and white film, and it's an interesting process, I will say, to bulk load. I've got a lot of respect for someone with the patience to to do that. But yeah, I'm really glad you guys are doing that. So you, as far as the stocks that you guys carry, you have Euphoria. Can you elaborate on what that stock is, or
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, so we have, the single black and white, which is our double X. And then we have color negative ECN2, which is essentially our 200T, our 250D, and our 500T. We'll release 50D pretty soon eventually. We just never really had anybody that are like, you got to do 50D, like it's been very interesting to see. We just bring a film to market when people ask us for it. So if there are people out there that really want 50D, then tell me, because at this point we haven't been buying it because I haven't really had anybody that's like been very adamant about having it on the shelf. So but it's the Euphoric is a very interesting one because it is a reversal film, so slide film. Traditionally it is processed in E6. And this is the Eastman Kodak 5294 Ektachrome E100D. And essentially, I was really inspired by the season 2 of Euphoria. The cinematographer Marcel Rev took 5294, and I speak in stock numbers. So when I say 5294, I'm talking about Ektachrome motion picture. 5294 was cross processed in ECN2. And so for certain sequences of the series, they use 5294 as a negative. And so what ends up happening is you get, when it comes out and you go to scan it in, you get this really strong cross-processed green. It looks purple, but it really is, this really strong green cast. Now, the interesting thing is when you go into color grade that, you can actually negate that green cast with a whole bunch of magenta. So like lab techs might know what I'm talking about here. When you start adding like magenta to it, it starts to offset the green. And the interesting thing is once you cut through that green cast, you get this amazingly beautiful rich color, strong contrast image. And the cool thing about Euphoric was when they did that, I was like, I wonder if we can do this ourselves. And so, I contacted Kodak Film Lab Atlanta and I said, hey, they did this, and is this something that do you guys have any concerns if we send 5294 through your lab? And they're like, no, we can do it. I was like, okay, sweet, all right, let's try this. And so we got our hands on some 5294, spooled it up, and we sent it off to them for processing, and we took it back to the lab. And so we got Fuji Frontier scanners and Noritsu HS 1800s. And so we just started experimenting and trying to color grade it in the lab, and I'll be damned, it worked. We were able to cut through that very strong green cast, and we were left with these amazingly brilliant colors. And so we were like, oh my God, we can do this. And so and that's kind of how Euphoric was born. It was, it's an homage to this really cool process that Marcel Rev brought to light. Apparently this was also a thing back in the day. Spike Lee certainly was very well known for his cross-processed motion picture films. So it's definitely not the first time it's been done, but it's been kind of a process that nobody really experimented with, right? It's been a very long time. And so we want to honor that tradition through Euphoric. And so, and the cool thing is, if you don't want to do ECN2 processing, you can process it as E6, and still get positives out of it. There's no remjet, so essentially it can be, shot as normal slide film. And so it's really exciting. That has been certainly our biggest seller, and we're really grateful that we can provide this really cool film. So yeah, the ECN2 aspect of 5294 is just, it's fantastically cool. I mean, I love doing it all the time. So if anybody's out there that's interested, highly recommend doing that, because I know that you can do it with C41. It's definitely doable C41, but the interesting thing about it is that with C41 there's like a little bit stronger contrast, so cutting through that green filter, it requires a little bit more work, but for some reason with the ECN2, like being just kind of more of a flatter profile when it's processed, it's a little bit easier to deal with when you're grading, because that's essentially what the flow is with Kodak motion picture is the films are designed to be scanned. Vision 3 is to be scanned. So it's with intent to be digitized. And so it makes it easier from a still side and have that flexibility to edit the negative or the image, your scan essentially. You have a lot of flexibility in creating some really great looks. And that's what, that film is intended to do.
Yeah, that stuff is pretty awesome. I will say, I actually had a friend tell me that it was actually developed in ECN2 with the Euphoric, and so I had a batch in the lab, and I was like, all right, I'll give this a shot. I've got some Ektachrome I got from a friend who bulk loaded, and I was like, all right, we'll see. I'm about to ruin this roll of perfectly fine Ektachrome, and I was in awe when I started scanning the film in, because you didn't really have to do any adjustments to the color for correcting it when it was developed in ECN2, and I was just amazed. So I definitely want to shoot more of the Ektachrome, the Euphoric with the ECN2 kit and developing these ECN2. The color is just amazing. The first time developing E6, you're like, ooh, wow, these are the images. And the first time making a print in the darkroom, you're like, oh, wow, I made this. And the first time scanning that film in and having it come up on the screen, I was just like,
right?
just amazed.
It's an incredible experience. I mean, it kind of like, and I agree with you. I mean, it's just like that reinvigorating experience, right? I remember seeing a print come, for the first time, in the darkroom, seeing, an image show up on the print for the first time was like magic, right? So like having that opportunity, or that, like, it's almost like an addiction, like to have that experience again, to be able to be like wowed by it, you chase that. It definitely was like that with Euphoric, because when it came up on the screen, and then I was like, oh man, this is really green image. All right, magenta. Oh my God, magenta. Holy crap, this is amazing. And so I just remember, I was like, Michael, Christina, come here. Look at this, guys. Holy crap. And they're like, okay, that's just the first frame. Let's go to the next one. Like, let's make sure we can repeat this. Right. And, so we went through all 36 exposures on that roll. And every single time I was like, okay, yeah, this is totally doable, and then like, I really was like, all right, I need to shoot in different lighting conditions. I got to do, tungsten lighting. I got to do, I need to break this. Like, I could not believe that this was like working, right? I was just like, yeah, like I if I'm going to sell this, I need to be sure that, this is, nobody's going to have a bad experience with it. Right. So I was very, critical of the process, right? Like I was just like, I didn't believe this was going to work. And every single scenario that I put myself into, I started learning the nuances of this, right? And Marcel Rev, even in his interview with Kodak, even talked about like how the lighting conditions had to be right. In on motion picture sets, the lighting is very, very controlled, right? So like very flat light. You have a very narrow dynamic range with your images, or what you're shooting. And I would agree with him on a lot of that, but what's been really interesting out of this is that we all know that with slide film, if you overexpose it, it's like blown out. It's gone. You can't recover that at all, right? It's done.
Yeah.
But the fascinating thing out of this is that because the euphoric only goes through one developer, right? So in E6, you go through the first developer, and then there's a second developer. It never goes through a second developer, right? So it hits the first developer, gets rinsed, goes through fix, bath, and stop, fix, and bleach, and everything along those lines, right? So you can, the cool thing out of it is that it's a negative. So if you blow that frame out and overexpose it, you actually can recover your highlights incredibly well out of it. So I was just completely blown away, because we had some images where like, the scan comes through and like the clouds are just like pure white. And I was like, all right, let me add a little bit of density here. And, +1, +2, +3, holy crap. There's my cloud detail. Like, it was just like, there it is, and, there's small sacrifices that you're making in that sense where, you're starting to lose shadow detail in that regards, because you're just adding so much density to the negative. But if you really wanted to, you can certainly take multiple exposures from that scan, and then you can do your own little HDR thing, which works and everything. And I played around with it, but never put too much time into it. But the negative actually has a lot to offer that was very surprising. So yeah, Euphoric is just a fun film, and just to have that flexibility to be able to take it wherever you want, to whichever lab that you want, and process it. E6 is totally fine, and if you want to send it to us for the euphoric look, you can definitely do that too.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a beautiful film. I love it. I've got a friend who her goal is pretty much to shoot every film out that's out there. So I'm sure she's shot that, and she really enjoyed it. I think she sent it back to you to get developed. So,
did she? Okay, cool.
But yeah, ECN2 is amazing. So I guess, how is your film different than like Cinestill? It's, go into that.
Yeah, I'm totally happy to get into that. So Cinestill Films' approach to this is their 800T essentially is 500T. Early on, when they went into this, just in the interviews that I've had with them, is that this is a really cool film, which I happen to agree 1,000,000%. But the problem is the processing side of it, right? So the labs out in California only want to focus on hundreds, thousands of feet and everything along those lines. So their approach was, how do we get entry into all the labs that are out there, processing this in C41. So their approach was to come up with a way to remove the remjet and then spool it up, and then deliver a product that is safe for the labs. And so that definitely works. I have no quarrels with what they do. The disadvantage out of that is, I wouldn't even call it a disadvantage. It would just, a small sacrifice out of it is that the halation, you run into higher risks where you get that red glow. A lot of photographers out there have really leaned into that. I don't even want to say it's a limitation, right? It's an aesthetic.
It's definitely a feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, people have, a lot of photographers have leaned into that, and now you see Cinestill film being used on the cover of, album magazines or albums covers and stuff like that. So it's a legit film. They cut their teeth to earn their legitimacy and everything along those lines, and I applaud them every little bit. But but there was always this kind of like quiet voice that's like, well, what if I don't want the halation glow, right? And I agree, and that voice has been very quiet. So our approach was growing the infrastructure from an ECN2, like making this process more accessible.
Right.
So our motion picture film that we get is not modified at all. The only modification is actually cutting it from hundreds of feet down to 5 feet to be your 36 exposures. And then taking it to the labs that can process it in ECN2. So we offer that pathway for those that want to process it. We kind of say, hey, will you do 100% ECN2? This is the exact same stuff that chemistry that J.J. Abrams uses, and all these cinematographers and directors that shoot their features on motion picture films, right? And that has really opened the door to us because there's definitely an area of the industry where DPs want to test their lighting and not necessarily shoot 400 feet and then pay a lot of money for scanning everything. Again, this is something that's like super, super niche, but like it has really opened the door a lot for us because we're now starting to see a lot of requests coming in from Hollywood saying, hey, is this the real process? Like, that is going through the actual ECN2 process. You're not doing, you're not removing the remjet, or you're not modding this film at all. No, this is like the exact same stuff. The only caveat is when it's scanned, the scan is not going to be log. It's not going to be, in a traditional cinematic capture, right? But we can do things where we can scan it in a flat profile, so the contrast is really, really low, and mimic a look that is like log. Alternatively, there are other labs, which, Midwest Film Co. is a great one. I don't have any quarrels. I think Justin's great. He does ECN2 processing, and then he has I think it's a Black Magic scanner. And then he does offer that other half of the component where, it is a actual capture of a still from a motion picture capturing device. So that is certainly growing out there as well. And so we are getting requests from Hollywood quite a bit about processing test shots, and they're ordering our film, and then we're shipping it to LA quite frequently. And then that film comes back, and then we process it, scan it, and send them the images. And then, so yeah, it's certainly an area that has been very hungry to have that process. And so now, to have the that available for stills photographers has been really exciting because. I try not to dive into the chemistry because I want to nerd out with ECN2, right? Like I'll be happy to go down that rabbit hole with anybody, but at the end of the day, there are certain customers that aren't crazy photographers, right? They just happen to be people that like to shoot on film. They don't know aperture, they don't know f-stops and all that stuff, so and we have to recognize those people, right? And so
right.
So when they ask questions and like, hey, do you have this film or that color film or this color film? And we're like, no, we don't have them, but we have this film, Atlanta Film Co. 500T. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. And then we kind of have to say, this is a film that, it has to be brought back to us, or it goes through a special process, right? You can't just take it to any other place that will process it. So you might, run into problems there. And so they're like, oh, okay, well, do I have to shoot this any differently? Well, no, you don't have to. Just set it to the number that is on the can. And then when you're done, bring it back to us and we'll deliver final images at the end of the day. And they're like, okay, cool. And then, they go through that entire process and they're very happy with the end result, and so, there's definitely some marketing behind it that goes in, oh, well, this film, The Force Awakens, was shot on 5207. This is 250D, like, so we know the movies that, these films were shot on and everything. And so we're able to kind of bridge that connection from pop culture or, movies that are pop culture to the films that are being used. And then that connection is being made. And then now we can, we make a sale from that regards. Right. So, so we kind of take the mystery away from the chemistry, because the second I start saying ECN2 to somebody that is not, a film photography, not like myself, I've lost them. Right. So at that point, it's like, just bring it back to us. We'll take care of it for you. You don't have anything to worry about. And so we are constantly selling those films quite frequently. At the end of the day, when, we do get stocks of, the big color brands, when they finally, make it the way, they sell out. Right. And that's fine. I recognize that, we're kind of more of a second choice to those options, but like, it's still an option when there is no other option. And we're slowly becoming this interest, right? Because it's like, ooh, I'm shooting on a motion cinema film, right? So that kind of like mystique around it is it's growing, and so Euphoric is certainly kind of is a different beast within itself, and that's you can take that to any lab, right? So and you're certainly bridging that pop culture, right, with the euphoria. And so so that certainly has been kind of like what kind of made us a little bit more mainstream.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I had a question for you. Why doesn't the Ektachrome have a remjet layer on the back? If it's going through a motion picture camera, shouldn't it? Or is that a different process?
I think ultimately, I'll be honest, I can't really speculate all too much as to why the choice was. I think at the end of the day, mostly is there are anti-halation dye layers and stuff like that. So it works. The purpose of the remjet layer is really kind of like it does reduce halation, by a lot, but also it's anti-scratch and an anti-static film, right? So like if you think about it, films rolling through a camera at 24 frames per second, that's very, very fast. So
Right.
And the film is plastic, so once you start getting friction building up with the film moving through, you have static that starts to build up. That carbon backing on the remjet displaces that static. So that's why, if you shoot Cinestill film really, really fast, you might run into like that red spider web that shows up on your frame. That's actually static that had discharged on the film. And then that red glow, because it happens on the backside, that red glow spider web is the actual static that went off in your camera. So if you're popping off like 3 or 4 frames per second, like let's just say you got like a Nikon F100 or something like that, and you burst it, you run a risk where, in the winter time like it is now, the humidity is very low, or even out west, humidity is going to be very low. You have a high risk of that static going off. So it's very possible, and I don't know, again, I'm just me purely speculating, is that there are certain films that are anti-static bases that most likely the Ektachrome is likely going to be on, where you can't get that static discharge on it. I don't know. Again, I know that Kodak offers films that are on anti-static, so that's my assumption on that. I could totally be wrong on that, but at the end of the day, the Ektachrome works just fine on inside the camera, and it's, I don't know, unicorn magic. That's my answer.
Yeah.
Unicorn magic and rainbows and sunshine. I think that's what keeps it from not having remjet.
That's how film works.
yeah.
It's all magic.
Yeah, but I mean,
when I first
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when I first heard how film worked, I was like, wait, that's how it works? That's how, so photons come flying off, hit the silvers, and then they react, and you run it through chemistry. that's how film works. I thought it was magic. This whole time I didn't understand it. And then it finally made sense.
Well,
Sort of. There's a lot to it.
I mean, it's amazing how much happens to something that is so thin. I think they said that the film is 20 microns thick. To have an image that is, all that chemical reaction that's happening on something that is just this small layer of plastic is just fantastic. I think it's a very exciting thing, and I'm not trying to sound, to like be all romanticized about it, but it is, it's still to this day, something that, 35 millimeter film is, 100 years old. How the heck they figure out to do that 100 years ago is just, it's fascinating that we're still doing that today. It's very cool.
Yeah, we have to pay homage to all the scientists and chemists and alchemists that put an effort to get it going ever since 100%. The first photo was taken to making it to plates and different processes, and then finally becoming something that's consumable and also is archival to some degree. And I've got negatives that I've scanned of my parents from back when they were my age, and I'm just amazed that the colors is still there. Looking at Kodachrome slides that were shot in the 80s and the 70s, and just amazed that the color is as vivid as it is still. So mad respect to all those people putting in lots of time and energy to figure all that out. It's definitely magic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that kind of led me down this path was, when my family friend had passed away, he left me this Yashica 635, and it was all jammed up. It didn't work. It sat, like, I remember as a kid, that camera sat on a shelf for as long as I was a kid, so as long as I can remember. So after he left these cameras for me, I took it to, a local camera repair place, and they got repaired. And, when I first saw the slides that came out of it, I was like, this is a camera that was made in the 1950s. How the heck does this look as good as like something that was shot like on digital, right? Like it looked like an image from today, like it was a crazy concept for me to latch onto, because this was so old, but it still looked so great. And so that really was kind of what led me down this path, is that like, it's not so much a film versus digital kind of thing, right? I think that these two mediums certainly can coexist with each other. And so it's just fascinating. I think that the technology that's still being put into film is it can hold itself up to digital very easily.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've seen a few different places building units that are doing processing, new processors for labs, for development. And one of the things that I always thought and kind of explained to people is that a lot of these labs have old units, and the instruction manuals are long but gone, and the techs are as well. So they've passed away because it's some of these machines are really old when they were invented, and some of them are falling apart, and it's exciting to me to see that they're putting that much money and energy into this to keep it alive, and especially what you guys are doing with making this available. I think bulk loading's awesome. It's just it's one way of helping offset the challenges with getting color film back into the community, and so you're not only helping provide color film to the community as a consumable, but you're also providing something that's different too with like the Euphoric and the other films that you guys have. So mad respect to that.
I appreciate it. It's fascinating because, bulk loading was kind of like this thing that has been like, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a very time consuming process. But there are very brilliant minds within the community that are working on trying to make that solution a lot easier. You know, the equipment that I use, I don't make it any secret. Like, you know, when Resvot came out with their 400-foot bulk loader, I was like, yes, I need this right now. I mean, like I instantly bought it the second I found out about it. And, you know, it saved me an hour from, you know, spooling down 400 feet to 100-foot reels to just throwing a 400-footer straight into this thing and then, you know, start loading film without wastage, you know? So like I'm squeezing out every single inch of this film throughout the entire thing. And then now, you know, we've added the 1,000-foot loader because there's like, for example, the Euphoric is a constant, like people are constantly ordering it. So like the 1,000-footer is pretty much dedicated just for the Euphoric. And that gives me 200 rolls on 1,000-foot roller. And I'm getting every single perf out of that for what it's intended for. So there are people that are already working on, you know, auto bulk loaders and stuff like that. You know, the Resvot came out with their leader trimmer, you know, so like, you know, they're coming out with products and solutions that I have been begging for, you know, 6-7 months ago. And there's other bulk loaders out there that they've been begging for this for years, you know? So, there are tools that are coming out to make this easier and more accessible. So I only see more and more people going, let me try this out with bulk loading. Cause I mean, that's what it started off with me was, you know, 100-foot Lloyd's bulk loader. I mean, that's how Atlanta Film Co. kind of started and how it cut its teeth. It was a little $50 bulk loader. So anybody can do this, you know, it's just, you know, how much do you want to put into this, and to grow it, you know, because there are people out there that, have their own Etsy stores, and, you know, they got their own special, you know, I don't even say branded, but like, I mean, they literally just slap, you know, this is $52.19 on it, you know, and then people go and buy it because they're, you know, their overheads are almost nothing. So they're selling it cheaper than us. You know, and they're just doing this and, you know, it's a side hustle, right? So we're just making from the Atlanta Film Co. side. We're also, the film that we make is no different than, you know, any of the other bulk loaders, but what we're trying to offer is the infrastructure to have it processed in the chemistry that was intended for and making that more accessible.
That's amazing. I'm excited for you guys. I hope, all the best to Atlanta Film Co. You guys deserve it. What are your social links, if I might ask? On
Instagram, you can find us. It's atlantafilm.co. And Twitter, I got to be better about Twitter. It's growing, but I mean, I primarily use the Studio C41 because the following is bigger there, but I'm still kind of interchangeably going back and forth between the two. But Atlanta Film Co., I think it's all one word on Twitter. And then you can find us online at atlantafilmco.com.
Awesome. Well, I'll include those links in the notes for the podcast. Well, it was great chatting with you, Bill. Anything else that you want to add?
No, I mean, if you're interested, you listen to this and you find, you know, you want to take a crack at bulk loading, you are more than welcome to reach out to me on either the Atlanta Film Co. DMs or even on my Studio C41. I try to do my best about reading every single message that hits the DM box. But if you have any questions, I am an open book. My approach to this is, anybody can do this. And I certainly want to be helpful in teaching people and doing that regard. So please don't be shy to reach out, because I certainly want to help anybody that's interested in this. Awesome.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate you being on the show today. And hope to have you on again soon.
Likewise.
I'm sure you got lots of insight with the film community, and we'll definitely want to chat again here. So awesome. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks for having me, and it was a blast to talk about this. It's an honor to be on your show.